Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 5th Biennial Conference of the AsianSIL 2015 in Bangkok. The main theme is international law and the changing economic and political landscape in Asia. The event is co-organized by AsianSIL and Electronic Transactions Development Agency, or ETDA, and I, Pariya Netvishian, will be the MC of this session. In the morning, we were most honored to welcome Her Royal Highness Princess Pacharakitiyapha as the honorary advisory chairperson of the 5th Biennial Conference of the Asian Society of International Law 2015 and distinguished keynote speakers at the plenary opening session. After that, we have conducted the first panelist session and have welcomed honorable keynote speakers, which were His Excellency Judge Hisati Ovada, Judge and former President of the International Court of Justice, former President of the Asian Society of International Law from 2007 to 2009. His Excellency Aziz, former Prime Minister of Islamic Republic of Pakistan. His Excellency Camacho, Managing Director, Vice Chairman, Asia Pacific, Country Chief Executive Officer from Singapore. Her Excellency Judge Su Han Ching, Judge of the International Court of Justice, former President of the Asian Society of International Law from 2009 to 2011. His Excellency A.K.P. Mokan, Deputy Secretary General in Asian Community and Corporate Affairs Department, and His Excellency Professor Dr. Surakiat Sathyanthai, former Deputy Prime Minister and former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand. And he also President of the Asian Society of International Law from 2014 to 2015. ETDA will stream the event via ETDA's YouTube channel, which is sponsored by True Internet Company Limited. Conference documents and summary of ETDA session will also be uploaded on ETDA website at the end of the conference, so please go to worldwideweb.edda.or.th to download. The session that ETDA is scheduled to host will cover topics that are close to us, since technology advancement can lead to interesting legal issues that bring about discussion both on domestic and international stage. The topics we will cover on this occasion are privacy, personal data protection, and internet governance. ETDA sincerely hopes that this conference will be another forum for people to discuss and create knowledge and understanding of related topics, especially legal issues and their impacts that might affect the country's economic as a whole. In addition, it is hoped that the conference will build a venue where people can exchange their views under the atmosphere that promotes learning. The first topic today will be privacy and how the law can protect people's privacy in this digital era. Now, I would like to invite Mrs. Surangkana Wayupap, the Executive Director and CEO of the Electronic Transaction Development Agency, or ETDA, on the stage to open the session and discuss about technology trends and impacts of privacy. Please give her a big hand.
His Excellency Professor Dr. Surakiat Sathyanthai and the Chairman of ETDA, Than Jiran Bunphem, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As the Executive Director of the Electronic Transaction Development Agency, public organization ETDA, and a member of the National Legislative Assembly, I am pleased and honored to welcome you to this special session on privacy, co-hosted under the collaboration of AsianSIL and ETDA. I am also delighted and honored that ETDA was invited to facilitate this session on technology trends and impacts of privacy, focusing on what happened in Thailand. It all started from the birth of the concept of the internet in 1960s and became popularized through World Wide Web in mid-1990s. Now, we have more than 3 billion internet users worldwide, more than 159 million of those in ASEAN. Not only humans are connected to the internet as the internet user, but machines and devices are connected to the internet as well. Cisco boldly predicted in the white paper in 2011 that 50 billion things will be on the internet by 2020. Today, the number of the internet connected electronic devices continue to rise at an alarming pace. Gartner listed information of everything, or IoT, or Internet of Things, and the devices made in their top 10 strategic technology trends. Everything with the ability to send and receive information will communicate with the network and with each other with or without human intervention within a very near future. Your camera, car, coffee maker, rice cooker will be able to take to each other and share information about you, their owner, in real time. The increasing number of internet users and devices connected to the internet accelerate the growth of data. Domo announced that last year, Facebook users shared nearly 2.5 million pieces of content. YouTube users upload 22 hours of new video. Email users send over 200 billion messages, and Amazon generate over $80,000. Among the large amounts of data generated, there are plenty of personal data that can be abused. Our Thai CERT team, CERT stands for Thai Computer Emergency Response Team under ETDA, which is responsible for cybersecurity incident handling, reported to me that there are hundreds of thousands of devices in Thailand that have security vulnerability and high risk of being penetrated. Personal data could be breached. The team tried its best, our team tried its best to get the device owner to fix the vulnerability, but resources are never enough to resolve the problem entirely. The new reality when dealing with cyber threat is that most people, and even the so-called security professionals, are not prepared nor equipped to deal with advanced and persistent cyber threats. There are so many obstacles, lacks of personnel, institutions, legislation, and national legal framework. Interestingly, based on ETDA Internet User Profile in 2015 survey result, some of these Thai people never paid much attention to protecting their own personal data and never took privacy seriously. We found that 45.8% of the respondents freely share personal data online. 36.4% did not set access permission to their personal data. 22.5% did not bother to read the terms and conditions for their online services. And 70.7% admitted sharing photos with the public. They seem to lack the basic understanding of what privacy is and how to protect their privacy rights. Also, the culture of sharing via social media application is widely practiced. In my estimation, even if we had law and regulations in place, we still could not have forced Thai people to change their behavior concerning privacy. Maybe in Eastern country also. In my opinion, privacy is one of the great mystery and challenges Thai society is facing. Did you know that Thai lawmakers have spent the last 20 years drafting and proposing a data protection bill, but it never reached a fruitful result? For your information, this administration is also trying to push the bill through. Today, we have a great honor from His Excellency Professor Dr. Surikit Sathyanthai, President of the ASEAN Society of International Law from 2014 to 2015, to be our keynote speaker on the topic of privacy challenges in Thailand. Please welcome Dr. Surikit Sathyanthai.
Excellency Jirawan Bunperm, Chairman of the Board of Electronic Transaction Development Agency, Excellency Virasakho Surat, former Minister of Tourism and Sports of Thailand, Ms. Surangkanang Wayupap, the Executive Director of ETDA, advisors to ETDA, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my greatest pleasure to be invited to be a keynote speaker to share with you some of my ideas on the challenge of the privacy issue in Thailand. I also have to congratulate ETDA for organizing a successful side event session of the 5th Biennial Conference of the Asian Society of International Law. In fact, among the 100 academic papers that have been selected to present in the main conference of the 5th Biennial Conference of the Asian Society of International Law, there are some issues concerning cybersecurity and internet as well. But the organizing committee has agreed that it is very important and deserves such an arrangement to have the specific session called side event alongside or in conjunction with the 5th Biennial Conference of the Asian Society of International Law. So I just would like to commend the initiative and the effort of the Executive Director, Surangkanang Wayupap, who has tirelessly working very hard to put the session together and has invited all the prominent speakers to speak at this very important session. Ladies and gentlemen, technologies have continuously evolved to accommodate growing consumer demand for faster, better, and more efficient devices, which must evolve in order to remain significant to consumers. Otherwise, they become another example of obsolete technology that nobody uses. Traditionally, we use information communication and technology or ICT as a communication tool. Today, as we all know, ICT plays a much larger role as a facilitator for productivity and as an enabler which provides sustainable environment for the emergence of the digital economy. However, the closer Thailand moves towards the digital economy, the louder we can hear voices asking, what about the impact on privacy? What is privacy? Privacy is one of the basic universal human rights according to all citizens of all countries, although it is not always understood and protected to the same degree by every country. But what is exactly the meaning and definition of privacy, both in legal terms and in general terms? The right to privacy is guaranteed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which provides in Article 12 that, and I quote, "No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. So on the other hand, OECD privacy framework defines the term of personal data, quote unquote, as any information relating to an identified or identifiable individual or data subject. Under the EU, the European Union Directive 95/46/EC of the European Parliament and of the Council of 24th of October 1995 on the protection of individuals with regard to the processing of personal data and on the free movement of such data. The words personal data, quote unquote, shall mean any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person or data subject. And such identifiable person is the one who can be identified directly or indirectly. In particular, by reference to an identification number or to one or more factors specific to his physical, physiological, mental, economic, cultural, or even cultural and social identity. The above examples illustrate that privacy can mean different things to different people. But one thing is certain, privacy must involve protection of personal data. However, the question is, what would be the appropriate protection of personal data? Ladies and gentlemen, different countries and different societies may treat such protection differently. Domestic privacy laws reflect the differences in how sensitive personal data is or should be protected. In general, it is prohibited to process personal data, which leads to the disclosure of information on race, ethnic origin, political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, trade union membership, and health or sex life. In certain countries, exceptions of the prohibition are prescribed under special conditions such as explicit consent, labor law compliance, requirements for medical treatments, or law enforcement. How do we then make sure that exceptions will not lead to discrimination? Legal measures for protecting personal data in general are often based on a number of principles. The first principle is the collection limitation principle. Personal data shall be collected under the legitimate, equitable, and justified methods, and under the consciousness or consent of the data subject. The other principles include the data quality principle, the purpose specification principle, the use limitation principle, the security safeguards principle, the openness principle, the individual participation principle, and the accountability principle. I'm sure Professor Sutham would elaborate much more on these principles. Even though many countries now adopt similar principles governing the protection of the rights to privacy, the logic behind the protection of rights in different countries varies due to the differences in the historical background, cultural background, the ways of life, and beliefs in each society. These differences may lead to different degrees of protection of privacy in each country. With the increasing application of the modern use of the IT gadgets, more and more personal data is required by the gadgets to ensure the ease of use. This can easily lead to the deprivation of privacy. To avoid these privacy problems, software tools and services are created to support anonymity in electronic transactions. Unfortunately, these tools and services are used by cyber criminals to hide themselves in committing cybercrime. Indeed, balancing between privacy and security is one of the most challenging issues we are facing today. Looking at the case of Thailand, a country of 65 million people, the number of the mobile phone subscribers is over 85 million, and there are over 27, 28 million internet users as of 2014. The value of e-commerce transactions in Thailand has reached the highest rank among ASEAN countries, amounting to 2.2 trillion baht. These numbers reflect the transformation that Thailand is going through, and under this transformation, more and more Thais are concerned, and rightly so, with the issue of privacy. Many views that Thailand has no law at all on privacy and no legal framework on privacy protection. That is not entirely true. When we consider data protection principles that appears in many of Thai legislations. Our constitutions, for example, in 1991, in 1997, we have several constitutions, and in 2007, provide for the fundamental protection of privacy. Government agencies, banks, and telecom operators must protect personal data as prescribed in their regulatory legislations. The personal data related to health or related to a child is protected under the Child Protection Act and the National Health Act, respectively. However, after a long process of development of legal framework to protect privacy, it is still undeniable that now is time for Thailand to make an effort and push through a legislation to protect our personal data and our privacy in order to support the national policy on digital economy. This privacy protection law will provide for definitions of the terms relevant to privacy protection that are in line with the international principles. In Thailand, we have been lucky because the Thai society has always been an inclusive and, should I say, interfaith, tolerant society, regardless of races and beliefs. No doubt, Thai privacy law will have to be based on such characteristic of the Thai society that is interfaith, tolerant society. The notion, in my view, of equality of the privacy standards actually impairs legal risks and demonstrate that consideration of legal substance is not sufficient to measure equality. Practices of law must also be examined in details and must lead to acceptance. Ladies and gentlemen, if we cannot overcome such challenges, we may not have any privacy in the digital space that is emerging, is surrounding us at all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Please give a big round of applause for His Excellency Professor Dr. สุรเกียรติเสถียรไทยเรียนเชิญท่านอยู่บนเวทีกับเราก่อนนะคะ And may I now invite the following guests on the stage for a group photo, please. Mrs. จิรวรรณ บุญเพิ่ม Chairman of the Executive Board of Directors ETDA. Mrs. สุรังคณาวายุภาพ Executive Director and CEO of ETDA. Mr. วีรศักดิ์ โคสุรัตน์ the former Minister of Tourism and Sports, Thailand. Associate Professor สุธรรม อยู่ใน Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of Thai Chamber of Commerce. Professor Julia Savinocchio, Professor, Department of Legal Studies, University of Bologna, and Chairperson of AsianSIL Working Group 4. Dr. Laurie Law, Chair of Asia Pacific Association of Technology and Society, and Ms. Sarini Achawat-Nantakul, Adjunct Professor, Thammasat University, Member, Thai Netizen Network. Thank you all the distinguished guests for joining us today. And this is time for a group photo. Thank you very much, everyone. Once again, today ETDA will stream the event via ETDA's YouTube channel, which is sponsored by True Internet Company Limited. So conference documents and summary of ETDA sessions will also be downloaded on ETDA website after the end of the conference. So please go to worldwideweb.etda.or.th to download. And next is going to be a group discussion on topic. Very interesting topic today. A thinnest line between privacy and cybersecurity, an ideology of Eastern and Western world. And on this occasion, we are honored to have Associate Professor Sutham Yunaitam, Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of the Thai Chamber of Commerce, as a moderator. Please give him a big round of applause. And the panelists of this discussion are Professor Julcela Finocchiaro, Professor, Department of Legal Studies, University of Bologna, and Chairperson of UNCITRAL Working Group 4. Also, Dr. Laurie Law, Chair of Asia Pacific Association of Technology and Society. And Ms. Sirini Achawat-Nantakul, Adjunct Professor, Thammasat University, Member, Thai Netizen Network. Distinguished discussants, this stage is all yours.
Thank you. His Excellency Surakiat, Kun Sulankana, and distinguished guests. This is a very interesting session, and this is a kind of follow-up session of the question that has been asked and left to us by Dr. Surakiat. What we are going to do with the advancement in technology in the near future, everything will be connected. Everything will be connected. It is IoT, it is M2M. It will be giving information with or without our consent. So we are living in a world where everything is connecting. Connecting is not just connected. They are connecting more and more. In the near future, it's not just human talk to human. It will be machine talk to machine. And the machine will talk to human, and human will talk to machine. And then there will be exchanging information. Exchanging of information is the most important thing that will drive us into the future. The innovation that we have today is about data transmission. It's about the exploitation of data. The innovation that we are doing now is the term that Google is kind of proposing. This is data-driven innovation, something that will be a future for us. What is exchange is the information, and it's about privacy, about everything. And recently we have the event in Paris, the terrorist attack. We are thinking about how to go about this cyber security, how to go about privacy, what kind of new balance we are catering or changing for the future. Today we have a very good chance to have a distinguished speaker from different area of the world. One is a great professor from Bologna, Professor Dr. Jusla. She is the a full professor at the Bologna on Internet and Privacy. She is also the chair of the AsianSIL, United Nations Conference on International Trade Law, which is doing a lot on e-commerce and privacy. She will be talking about the idea of privacy that is available now and what are the legal framework that we should develop in the future. And second, we also have Dr. Lolly Rao. Dr. Lolly Rao is on the ASEAN side. He is from Hong Kong. He received his degree from UK, and he has been an advocate and writer of quite a few books, right, on cybercrime and privacy. He will share with us what is the future of privacy and cybersecurity. And then we have our own expert, Kun Sarini, who is also the member of the Thailand, who is very active in the area. She has written many books, translated like 45 books, right, already on internet and privacy, and she will share with us the idea how to go about it. And we can also share the local setting as well. So we have quite an interesting international panel to work with. And then after the expose and some Q&A among ourselves, we will open the floor for you to kind of exchange the idea or discuss with us or the speaker. So without the delay, I'd like to introduce and invite Professor Dr. Jusla to talk about the privacy, the thinnest line between privacy and cybersecurity, how you see and how it will be in the future, what kind of work the AsianSIL or legal framework that we are talking and discussing. Please, your floor.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. I will share with you some slides about privacy legislation in Europe and recent developments by the Court of Justice in Europe. And I hope it can be useful for further discussion. Privacy in Europe is a fundamental right. According to the Charter of Fundamental Rights in the European Union, privacy is protected by Article 7. And privacy in this sense means respect for private and family life. There is another different article of the same charter, Article 8, dealing with protection of personal data. So in Europe we recognize two different rights, which could be referred to privacy in general. Privacy as a respect for private and family life, according to Warren Brandeis, the right to be let alone, and privacy as protection of personal data and personal information. Main principles of personal data protection concern the right to control personal data and the recent controversial right to be forgotten. The main regulation is the Directive on Personal Data Protection. As mentioned before, it is the Directive 95 46 of the European Parliament. As you may know, it is under revision, and the new regulation is expected in 2016. The directive on personal data protection has the goal to protect fundamental rights and freedom of natural persons, and in particular, the right to privacy. Personal data are defined as information referring to natural person in any sense, and processing of personal data is defined as any operation on information. The directive on personal data provides different kinds of subjects and provides a very difficult balance between protection of personal data and freedom of expression. They are two different rights. It's difficult to balance them. In Europe, we do have a different approach if compared with the United States of America. In Europe, we recognize privacy and personal data protection as a main fundamental right, while in the United States, as you know, the freedom of expression is, according to prevailing view, recognized as fundamental rights. So, as has been said before, there is a different approach because of different culture, of different values, of different kinds of society. At this time, I would say in Europe, privacy is a priority and should be, in my view, a priority, even if we have, of course, as you know very well, after Paris attacks, we have a problem concerning security. But the balance between privacy or security is difficult to be defined, and we shouldn't forget that privacy is a fundamental value, at least according with our cultures and values. According to the directive on personal data protection, the data subject has the right to access to its or her data and to object to their processing. There are other specific provisions. I will skip some slides, but I think that it's very important for you to know which are the main rules concerning the transfer of personal data to a third country. According to the directive, transfer of personal data to a third country may take place only if the third country ensures an adequate level of protection. Very recently, and I will talk about that, the European Court of Justice decided that the United States of America do not provide an adequate level of protection to European data, and decided to invalid the so-called safe harbor. This is the Facebook decision, and I will mention that further. The level of protection is considered adequate in light of all the circumstances surrounding a data transfer operation, meaning the nature of data, purpose of processing, a country of origin and destination. In relation to that, consideration shall be given to the rules of law, to professional rules, and to security measures. If the third country does not ensure an adequate level of protection, member states take the necessary measure to prevent the transfer of personal data, meaning that personal data can be transferred to a third country, for Europe, for a European perspective, only if there is an express consent of the data subject, only if transfer is necessary for the performance of a contract, only if there is a public interest, and there is a protection of the vital interest of the data. Of course, these derogations are alternative, So either consent or necessity or public interest or protection of the vital interest of the data. This is what's happening now concerning data transfer from Europe to United States. Of course, being a void safe harbor protocol, one of these derogations should be applied. The European Parliament is going to approve a proposal for a regulation on general data protection. The proposal is dated 2012. There has been a lot of discussion about this proposal, and probably it will be adopted in January 2016, so at the beginning of the next year. When adopted, the directive on personal data protection will be repealed by the regulation. The regulation is a different legal instrument, so it's directly applicable in all European countries. It does not require national legislation to be effective. So it will be directly applicable in the 28 member states. It will be one law, one European law for the entire Europe. Which are the main innovations in the regulation? Of course, it will be a regulation, not a directive, so the legal instrument will be different. And then the regulation will provide expressly, the right to be forgotten, the right to data portability, the principle of accountability, and privacy by design. These are the main innovations in the new regulation. What does it mean, right to be forgotten? We can discuss, of course, this very controversial right for hours and for days. And it is quite difficult to be defined. It is very simply the right to obtain the erasure of personal data if data are no longer necessary, if there is a withdrawal of the consent or storage period has expired, if the processing is not in compliance with the regulation. The right to data portability, on the other hand, is the right to obtain a copy of data undergoing processing in electronic and structured format, and commonly used and allowing for further use by data subject. The principle of accountability is the obligation of the controller to adopt appropriate measure to ensure and demonstrate the compliance with the regulation. Privacy by design is the obligation to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures. At the end, privacy by default is the obligation of the controller to implement mechanisms for ensuring that only personal data necessary to the purpose are processed in terms of amount of data and time of storage. At the end, a few comments on two very recent European Court of Justice decisions. You certainly know, but they are particularly important because these decisions are applying the regulation, the future regulation, on personal data. So in a sense, the European Court of Justice is applying, before they are effective, the provision of the European regulation. The first decision I want to mention is the so-called Google Spain case. You are probably aware of it. It's well known as the decision recognize the so-called right to be forgotten. But not only this, the Google Spain decision is very important because the European Court of Justice decided that European law is applicable to the service provider, The European Court of Justice decided that data subject can take legal action against the service provider, in this case against Google, instead that against the newspaper publishing the information to be deleted. And in this decision, the European Court decided that there is an obligation to remove from the list of results displayed following a search made on the basis of a person's names, links to web pages published by third parties. So this is the so-called right to be forgotten, according to the European decision, but it is only said that it has been said this decision provided the so-called right not to be found on the internet, because it's almost impossible to find an information if you don't search it through a web search provider. So maybe right to be forgotten, maybe the right not to be found, as you prefer, but it is the basis of this decision. However, I would say that this decision is very important, not only because it states the right to be forgotten, but because it states that the European law is applicable to North American service provider, in the case Google. So what is very important to me, for my perspective as a lawyer, is that the European law seems to be applicable in any case if European data are processed. Another important decision is the so-called Facebook decision. This is very recent. It has been released in October, so 1 month ago. And this decision again provides that European law is the applicable law to European subjects' personal data. It stated that safe harbor is not valid because the United States of America do not provide an adequate, sufficient level of protection to European personal data. So the transmission of the data can be done only by consent or because of pre-approved rules by the European Commission. As you can easily see, this is, of course, a decision issued by the European Court of Justice. It has a technical and legal value, but it is only a political decision. You can see very easily that there is a political content in this decision stating that the European law is the applicable law in all these cases. So I will stop here with my presentation. If there is time, I will add some information about the work we are doing at AsianSIL, but I can do it also later, as you prefer, up to our distinguished moderator.
In fact, I'd like to hear about the AsianSIL work now. I mean, this is a very distinguished work that we are, everybody is looking toward it, because AsianSIL is an international legal body in which is drafting the law and propose the model law. And most of the country usually follow the AsianSIL model law. And if you don't mind, can we continue with the AsianSIL law? And that's very interesting. Yeah?
Yes. Okay.
Would you mind?
Yes, no
Yes,
problem.
please.
I don't know if anyone knows about the AsianSIL. AsianSIL is for United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. It is a commission of the United Nations. It was founded in 1966. And it deals with international commerce. The scope of AsianSIL is to remove legal obstacle to trade, to international trade. I have the honor to chair the working group on electronic commerce, and the working group on electronic commerce has produced in the years a model law on electronic commerce dated 1996, a model law on electronic signatures dated 2001, and a convention on electronic communication dated 2005. These three documents are different because, of course, the model law can be adopted by the state. The state can choose some provisions and not other provisions. The model law is in the area of so-called soft law. On the other hand, the Convention on Electronic Communication, dated 2005, is in the area of so-called hard law. It's an international convention. It has to be approved and ratified in order to be effective. 7 states, as far as I know, have already ratified this convention. Currently, in our working group, we are working on a model law on electronic transferable records. And we think we are going, hopefully, to finish our work in May 2016 in New York. And then it will be to the Commission to approve or not, or to approve or to revise the work done by our group. But of course, usually the Commission take in good consideration the work done by the working group. Next step will be of particular interest, I think, because probably it has not already been decided, but probably in the next future, we will work about cloud computing and identity management. And they are two very important issues. The cloud computing is more a technical one, and we are going to draft guidelines. The other one, identity management, is essential, in my opinion, for international trade. And we'll try to define rules in order to recognize digital identity recognized from a state in another state. This is our program. I hope that we can successfully work on that. The Thailandese delegation in the AsianSIL working groups is very active and always present. So it will be an occasion to work with valuable delegates also in the future.
Yes, thank you. We are quite active in AsianSIL as well because in Thailand we are drafting kind of a series of digital law, 8 laws, and one of them will be addressing all those security, privacy, and data transfer as well. And this is in the drafting process. It should be enacted soon. We hope we will continue along the same line as model law, right? So we are not, lagging far behind. But then again, there are a lot of things to consider as well because things change a lot after Paris attack. People are talking about, that will be yours next. People are talking about cybersecurity. What kind of level of protection we should think of in the future? All the bad guy, can use the internet or any public network to go by. What kind of thing we should be thinking in the future? Professor Loli Rao.
Well, coming from a background of East and West, because I grew up in the Western world and coming back to East to work, and I seen a lot of changes in the East, particular technologies. As I travel around in Asian country, and you see the vine of advancing in technology. One of the technology which is this speaker just mentioned, cloud computing. Cloud computing is a big thing not just in developing or slowly developing country, particular fast developing country like China. Cloud computing is a very big stuff. And in terms of security, the way I see it, well, technology itself is neutral. It's the person behind who making that technology is biased. Particular, a person like me who know something about coding, because I have a bachelor degree in computer science. And if I'm biased, whatever I do, that technology of my product is not going to be a neutral one, isn't it? So the way I see it, with today's topic, ideology between East and West. Well, ideology is all to do with one's political view. It's derived from 18th century of French revolutions. The word ideology is actually come from politics. So politics is also, in that term, is relate to governance. So if one government's perspective seeing different way, and for example, some country in Asia, and allow me to mention one country, China, and they see security is a ultimate of anything else, and surely they are not allowed much of privacy, isn't it? So if you see a country like Hong Kong, who had a much more freedom than in any city in mainland China, and will value our privacy, and the law there is quite transparent, and citizens like me who can go on a website and looking at all the law, hey, has anybody violating my privacy? And I had a way of redress of that violation. But if taking someone from China, mainland China, and you do not have this kind of privilege, because mainland China government security is a big thing. If anyone or anything shaking their governance of the whole country, and it's entirely different matter, and he or she will be taken down by the government. So if we looking at Asia, in Asia, different country had their different view of governance. So in terms of West and East, and in the West, it's far more constructive and far more orderly way, because it had certain level of law. In the East, and very diverse, and some country like Hong Kong or maybe Singapore are less so in terms of privacy, because again, Singapore government seeing security is a major thing. And so different countries had different view on that, in Asia particular, because we do not have a common political view on governance. And European Union had, because it had European Union as a platform. So drawing from that, as a moderator asking, will the Paris event will make matter worse? To my view, to my humble view, I think a lot of countries, particularly in Asia, governments will take that as a turning point and say, hey, we want to tighten up our security. And in that sense, we will tighten up a lot of privacy. And I'll give you an example. In the Western country, 2 weeks ago in the UK, and they are talking about exactly the same thing of I will look at all your data, but I will do it as a legislation through Parliament. And in terms of Western country, you will have a large spectrum of a government's view on how they treat privacy. Britain or UK are at the end of pro-legislation. If you look at Canada, and it's right top of pro-privacy country. If you do anything's violating individual privacy, and their citizens will come out and protest. But a lot of countries like the UK will go other way. It will introducing legislation and legally, and they will or the government will legally violating anybody's privacy within the law. And so in that way, in my view, with regarding the Paris event, and overall picture is pretty bleak for everybody in the world. I think even in the West are tightening up their privacy, and in a large way. And in the last decades, privacy on the internet is pretty loose in many ways. And so, in my view, it will tighten up overall.
Yes, I have some few more questions. Just pop up into my mind. What about M2M and IoT and 2020, when 50 billion things will be connected? It's not just telephone. It's just anything. It just maybe your shoes, maybe your phone. Anything will be transmitting data about your daily life. Well, is there any kind of built-in protection for us? As an engineer, what kind of thing you are?
Well, from my view, the internet invent is not for commerce anyway. It's invented for the convenience of military communication. And somehow, somewhere in America, someone think, hey, it's a good idea to push it in a commerce. So internet itself is not for commerce. So the machines built is not for that purpose. And now we're talking about ITO. 50 billion things will be connected. And well, I recently, before I came to Bangkok 2 days ago, I receiving a paper for reviewing for a journal, top journal. And now we are also talking about underwater Wi-Fi, the security of underwater Wi-Fi. And now people think, hey, I conquered the land. Now it's about time to conquer the ocean. So can you imagine? It's not just 50 billion things we're talking about. With future, we could be talking about 500 billion things under the waters. Apparently, under our current sea law, there's no law protecting anybody. If we were using internet under the sea, actually, for someone who is imagine how I'm going to using the internet. Well, actually, they use it from a magnetic induction method. And so if anybody who study physics, and they will know what I'm talking about. So we are not just talking about IoT. Well, in terms of protecting yourself. And a lot of manufacturers, they do not manufacturing for security in mind. They manufacturing to make profit. So for the convenience of the user or innocent of user, and they will absolutely give way of security. There's no one thing's 100% secure. Not on the internet. And I let you have my secret. I only using my smartphone 1.5 years ago. I always resist because I'm I'm supposing to know something about cloud, something about internet, and I know how unsecure smartphone is. But unfortunately, in Hong Kong, 1.5 years ago, I couldn't buy any other phone except smartphone. So can you see how much the commercial push is to pressure us to buying those connected things? And 4 years ago, I went to a fam trip in Jeju Island in South Korea. Internet of Things is already there, because Samsung is already testing with 1,000 houses, ordinary houses, with Internet of Things. And I know it's coming, and yet they are not putting it out. So in my view, with the Internet of Things, we are further muddy the water or privacy or security. So we are not secure.
And the M2M? How about M2M, the machine to machine? It's not just internet. Machine to machine, you can go into different kind of network and go through iCloud. And then data calculation and what kind of...
You will have multiple problems.
Exactly.
Yeah, multiple problems from one connection to another connection. And with my internet skill, I could actually hack in somebody who is connecting with connectors within 10 seconds. I could largely getting all the information, important data, including your credit card.
Yeah. So we don't have the solution as yet.
No solution until the manufacturer is working with somebody and say, hey, I want some solutions. Because no manufacturer will think security at their first end, isn't it? When they're making the stuff. And what they're thinking, how I'm going to convenience individual user to purchase my products.
And as an IEEE, do you involve in the Industrial Internet Forum of the US government?
Yeah, the IEEE had a lot of standards, but those standards is to do with chips, but not to do with how the manufacturers.
I think the US government is taking seriously about the internet, industrial internet also, right? Which is
in some way, yes.
Yeah.
But not to a restrictive commerce.
So we will see what is going on in the next few years.
We will see a lot more of argument about privacy, security. It will be a lot more, particular with the regard Paris thing.
So will the single gateway answer this question? This is the last question for you. And then we'll go on Kun Salini.
Well, the way I see it, I myself experienced single gateway in mainland China. Single gateway in China. I frustrated because being an internet user, I always get intermittently disconnected. Because one single gateway, what China's do, as I said earlier, China is hyper tensions about their own security. I mean, security of securing Communist Party continuously governance in the country, right? So that's called security. Anything shaking that mind is going to be problematic. So single gateway in China is problematic. When I'm in China, I always frustrated. It's very hard to connect it with the internet because they always filters what you're looking at. So that is a very dangerous thing. So when I experienced in Hong Kong, there's no single gateways. Hong Kong had multiple gateways. And you're surfing the internet and you like flying because nobody watching you. And at the back of your mind, you're certain this is nobody watching you. But in China, you'll be sure there's someone watching you because it's awful slow. So single gateway is very bad things for individual user, but maybe very good for the government because it's easier for control.
I don't know. But then we should not continue. And then we go on with Kun Salini. But she is working on this area as well. Kun Salini is very active from Thai netizen, and she is very active in the circle. what your observation about what is the local kind of occasion that we have and incident or the incident that we have. We are in Thailand. We face everything. We face all the censorship. We face all the single gateway. We face everything. However, we are the biggest user of Facebook, right? We are the capital city of Facebook, and there is no case about Facebook. What is going on?
Okay, so thank you everyone, and I think I'm the only non-expert on the panel actually. So we have two lawyers and an IT expert, and I'm just a user who's just really concerned about the way things are going. And for those who don't know, Thai Netizen Network is one of the civil society groups in Thailand. So we work on internet freedom and privacy. And needless to say, we've had our hands full pretty much for the past 2 years. And I don't want to start with single gateway because it's quite depressing. And in any case, the government has seemingly dropped or at least delayed the project. So I just want to say, going back to the topic, that there's actually one big thing I want to say is that in my mind, privacy and cybersecurity, properly defined, are not contradictory things, okay? Privacy, as many people already mentioned, Ajahn Surakiat mentioned, is one of the fundamental rights. It's a fundamental human rights. Without privacy, I think that it basically means we have no autonomy. And I think in Thailand, some people may say that we don't care, Thai users don't seem to care about privacy. I think the reality is more that we do care, but we're just not aware, right? So it's just that we're not aware of how much data and metadata and all these digital traces that we leave online. And we're not aware of what the repercussions of, what the impact of leaving those data mean. So I think that's more the situation. So as you may know, so in Thai culture, we're very outgoing. So we like to hang out in groups. But I think we do value our private life. We just have private lives in big groups, right? I mean, if we don't care about privacy, we would be giving out name card with the email passwords and everything. You know, so I think that that's where we are. At the same time, how do we secure our privacy? So clearly, cybersecurity is important. The quality of data, the technical protection of personal data, all of this is very fundamental to protecting our data, our privacy online. So I would say, in that scene, in that view, there are pretty much, to my mind, like two very important and necessary conditions for users everywhere. We need both. We need both privacy, and to guarantee privacy, we need cybersecurity. We need to know that the providers that are serving us have decent technical, standards and protection. The problem, I think, comes when there is an attempt to redefine or stretch the word cybersecurity into the realms of so-called national security, right? Whether it's national security in order to fight terrorism, as is the case now in many Western countries, or stretching national security to hamper freedom of expression, because the authorities feel that some content, some expression online is harmful to national security, and that's the case in Thailand. So I think that's where the problem is, and that's where we see some dangers of in government intrusion on privacy, and I think that's where the debate lies. So I think this is basically one, so therefore we need to make a very clear distinction. So when we say cybersecurity and when we say national security, and I just came back from the Stockholm Internet Forum in Sweden last month, and one of the speakers was Mr. Frank, who was Special Rapporteur to the UN on freedom of expression, and he was a very key person on articulating, what human rights mean in terms of online expression. And I think he made a very clear point that basically if government has due process, legal due process and oversight, then that is acceptable. I mean, if you have due process and oversight for any activities that can be seen as violation of human rights, but only with those. So the key words to my mind is due process and oversight, right? So oversight by the courts and legal due process. So I think those are very key. So the question is, how do we know as users whether there's a proper oversight and whether there's a proper due process or not in any instance where we feel that our privacy is threatened or being intruded. So I think that's a key question. And the reality is that it's very difficult or impossible really to know because an average user, right, like me, don't know so much about the law, okay? And as our expert mentioned, in the near future of Internet of Things, there'll be a gazillion things connected to the Internet at all times. So these digital footprints we leave are even more, I would say, there'll be even like much more traces we leave without our knowing. And there can be much more potential use of personal data without our knowledge. So I think that's why maybe just the legal protection or the legal construct is not enough. We need to also look at technical solutions that are built in as default for users, just because it's impossible for us to know. And I think that's why it's pretty much, just to add some good news to what you just said, I think some technologists are trying very hard to come up with end-to-end encryption, for example. They're really trying very hard to protect our privacy in a very fundamental default way. Some companies have already rolled out end-to-end encryptions. They try to improve encryption technology and all these things. And so that's why that's the thing that I see as some good direction, right? But of course, in the world of world terrorism threats, and in Thailand, there's these talks about national security that to us seem very broad. There's going to always be much more debate that we need to have. But I think we need to always go back to the fundamental, right? So how do we protect privacy as a fundamental human right? And again, going back to due process, going back to oversight, anything that is not necessary nor proportionate to the threat should definitely be opposed. And so I think to us it's quite clear that the single gateway is not necessary, not proportionate, to whatever threat the government perceives to come with the online arena. So I think that we need to, as we go into a more uncertain future and with the Internet and things, I think we need to articulate the debate even more clearly. And I think there's a tendency now to, again, stretch the term national security to encompass many things. Also, one last point is because I'm not an expert, so I try to follow as best I can on the discussions and debates among security experts, cybersecurity experts. And what I gather is that if we're really serious about cybersecurity in terms of the threat to the systems, right, there are some very basic ways we can do. And I think that nobody would argue with those ways, such as improving the security of your own networks, improving the technical know-how of the government officials and anyone in charge of the cybersecurity, maybe allowing the exchange of information. I understand this is really a big issue in the US, right? They just had this new law, CISA, that, and the debate really centers around the fear that this law would allow private operators to basically give private information to the authorities. And I think some experts say that you can actually fight whatever cybersecurity threats by removing personally identifiable data, for example. So that's an interesting debate they're having. But I think we're not even there yet, right, in Thailand. So, yeah, so I mean, there are some very direct, I would say, ways to improve the level of cybersecurity in Thailand without the need to evoke, ideas like single gateway, or without the need to throw up some ideas like mass surveillance, for example. And not to mention, there's also another, I think, interesting discussion they're having in the intelligence community about the value of human intelligence and the value of information intelligence. So, and there are a lot of people saying that because the terrorists or the bad guys are always a minority, right? So we always need to basically focus on those suspected, the suspects, the people who are suspected of doing bad things, more or less, right? So maybe it's easier for the government or anyone to collect information about everybody. But that doesn't necessarily improve, the chances of actually going after terrorists, because it's like you're taking in a big pool of data, and that's just a lot of noise because you know that the suspects are only a handful in that sea of information. So I think there are people who advocate using much more human intelligence and much more intelligent use of data and finding connections in the old style way, rather than just collecting every piece of bits and bytes available. So I think that's also an interesting, debate that they're having that I think is worth following, and I think for us here in Thailand as well, because as I understand, we're not just a top 10 country in terms of Facebook and Line users, but we're also top 10 in terms of facing cyber attacks. So I have to agree. I cannot deny what the experts say, right? So I think we do have a real, cyber security threats. But again, the way to fix it is to go direct to where the problem is.
And, I have a small question for you as a kind of representing users. I mean, in general, and you can answer from the non-lawyer perspective, which is really good. And the same question will be asked to lawyer and engineer. What kind of privacy setting you see for Thailand, given the local context? What happened during the last few months when people kind of attack after the government talk about single internet gateway, right? In fact, talk about single gateway, right? But everybody interpreted that it was a single internet gateway. Why people care so much about that? Wales, in the past 2 years, government maybe apply on privacy, and people didn't care much. But why when someone talk about single gateway, not internet gateway, single gateway, people get so crazy about that.
Okay, I can't.
Is there any difference between freedom, the way people see it, and privacy? And then you're going to ask Professor Jusla, is there any international minimum standard on that? But ask this for you first.
I probably can't speak for all users because I think people have different reasons for opposing, right? So some guys just maybe some people may just feel that my internet is going to be slow, right? So I can't stand slow internet, so get away, and that's it. But I think that a lot of people are much more aware because single gateway is an idea that speaks very clearly to, I think, at least in their minds, about government controlling the flow of information, right? Because essentially what that would allow, at least in theory, is that we would not be allowed to see what they don't want us to see. And so that's not maybe so much, that's not privacy, that's less like blocking your access to information. But the privacy angle of that is if the single gateway is really single gateway, then the system will become much more vulnerable, to attacks, as opposed to distributing, right, the traffic to different ways. So I think that's also a threat to cybersecurity, to privacy as well in that sense. It's not just if the government has control over this flow of information, they may have, first of all, they're going to have more information about us directly. So that's a fear of some people. Instead of the government having to ask, right now they have to ask, right, different private operators if they want information. And then through the process, they have to show the court warrant and this and that. But this will become much easier. So in terms of getting at the personal information, in terms of cybersecurity, it's going to be more vulnerable. So again, that raises more fears. Because then if you allow hackers to attack more easily, then that's another way that you can lose your private data, right? And that not just personal data, but in terms of banks and all these different business transactions that go on as well. So I think that in every facet, if you look at it, I think altogether combined, I think people may have different weights that they attach on what reason they oppose, but I think altogether it's more than enough.
And from local point of view, local context.
Right.
I'm talking about local context.
Yeah.
What kind of minimum standard that you advocate for Thailand? Minimum standard for Thailand.
Okay, so
and then we'll go on with
right. So this is my personal opinion, right? But I think that because we're talking about the internet, and the internet is a borderless community. So if Thailand enacts, say, a legal framework that we say it's okay, it's enough for our local context, and then we may even cite some statistics that say Thai users are not, do not care. But again, I think that it's more like they're not aware of the importance of privacy and personal data. Then the question is, will we be able to operate? Would that be enough? In other words, for internet companies from Europe or from the US to do business in Thailand? Would that be, so I think that's a practical question, right? So it's not even, it's not just that, well, we think that, let's say there's a level of privacy, this level is enough, and we may be happy about it, but if we don't go to, for example, the EU directive and these international standards, is that enough? So I think that's a big question that a lot of experts are asking. So if it's not enough, if the answer, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really, if that's not enough, then we have to go to the international standards anyway, regardless, right? And then the behavior of users, if there are behaviors online of Thai users, I think that's where the local context can come in. Like, for example, we may be upset that a lot of people seem to post, personal ID data, and then we have some like witch hunts, all these behaviors that we don't think is good, and it's also some people violating other people's privacy. Then I think we try to build norms, right? And then that's the work of advocacy, and that's the work of proper, we may have to talk about self-regulation in terms of how to encourage internet providers and internet service, applications and program and website owners to help build these norms, of proper norms in Thailand. But I think to me that's different from privacy protection. Privacy protection, I think it has to meet international standards. If we want to be in the international community, it also has to be mindful of the fact, I think, that we are not aware, we're going to be less and less aware of what kind of data we leave in the hands of corporates and what kind of data the government can access. So that's why going back to, I'm strongly in favor of technological solutions. End-to-end encryption, you need to this is a job of, I think, all the companies to do, and I think the more you can come up with these secure solutions, then the more users, customers will be happy for that.
Yeah, thank you. But after Dr. Chusra, I'll come back to you about the encryption, the later, the public key things. And Dr. Chusra, is there any kind of international minimum standard that countries should adhere to, or not? Or you are working on model law that will also respect kind of international minimum standard in terms of cyber security or privacy?
Well,
just personal.
My personal opinion, yes. I think that we should consider a multi-level approach, meaning that we should, first of all, agree on general principles, then about rules, then about technical regulation. So to answer, the answer to your question is not easy because it depends on the level we consider. So first of all, are we agreeing about general principles, fundamental rights, human dignity, personal data protection, privacy, and are we sure that we are discussing the same concepts if we have an European approach, an American approach, maybe an Asian approach? I think that the different regions of the world may have different cultures also on this point. So first of all, I would consider principle, meaning culture and values. Then rules. So we have, in Europe, we have a very strict regulation, I would say. The European directive and the proposal for the European regulation is very strict, is very severe, is very detailed. it's not the only possible approach. You can also agree on some principles, but not on about other principles. And then we need technical regulation. For instance, everyone would agree if we say that everybody has the right to have access to the internet. No? So this is a general principle. Everybody has the right to access internet, but the problem is how. Should we guarantee a certain speed? Should we be neutral or not? And so it depends on the level, I would say, you consider answering. And I don't think that an answer can be only on technical regulation. It should be an answer on principle, rules, and regulation.
But then again, we are connected into, when we are in a digital market, a digital platform, it's the same. I mean, I can talk to you directly over digital channel. And in the near future, when everything is so connected, I mean, they are the same market. And over the same transaction, should we be subject to the different kind of standard or not? I don't know. Yeah, and then the iCloud thing.
Yeah, it's, well, if we are connected in a digital way, we are certainly in the same market, but we may be bound by different laws. So this is the problem, that we have one market, we have one way of communication, but many different national laws. So the problem is to find a solution and to find a legal solution, a legal criterion in order to define the applicable law. At the moment, we have many applicable laws to the same case, to the same situation. Many judges advocating for the application of their national law. We should find a legal solution, meaning one criterion for the choice of law on the internet, meaning maybe a convention, for instance, the International Convention on e-commerce, in order to define a common legislation, a common set of rules.
The example would be the European regulation that is upcoming, right? Is it?
No, the European regulation will be applicable only to European, of course, to European states, and I think that it is a very strict regulation, and I don't think it is the minimum standard. It's much more than minimum standard.
Yes, Dr. Lau, you're writing about iCloud, East and West. What is it? The difference in iCloud, I mean, I never think there would be kind of East iCloud or West iCloud. In your book, what does it say?
Well, coming back to the minimum standard, in my view, I think minimum standards, in my view, is the public had to trust whoever in charge of government. And that is the minimum view. And how the government going to build that trust, it's how you bring in all those so-called international rules and regulations, and persuade, awareness, all your own citizens. And as long as you're building a trust, and that is the minimum rule. And that trust can be different from one country A to country B. And the majority say, hey, I agree to filter all my information. If the majority say, yes, I agree, then we had that trust. Then everybody will be happy. At least majority will be happy of that, whoever in government filtering the information. But unfortunately, a lot of countries are not in an effort to building the trust. And they often putting in a hierarchy law and say, hey, that's it, that's all you're going to have. and then that is the argument going to come in. And so, in my view, of minimum standard is how you're going to build that trust. Whether you're in the East or in the West, and you still going to need to trust your own citizen to do anything, isn't it? So,
but then again, the computer, I mean the cloud, they are connecting to one another as a peer, right?
Yeah.
So how can you put in the West and East into those cloud?
Well, because as I said, they actually internet or the machine itself is neutral, but whoever program it is biased. So in the East, a programmer might have certain things more important than in people in the West, right? So think about it. If I'm a programmer from mainland China, and I will think about, hey, I am thinking of my jobs if I've done anything upsetting the government, and I will be in trouble, right?
Yeah, Yahoo case, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. It is Yahoo case that it will customize data according to the host.
Absolutely. Most of the country will, or most of the company who running the data center will be customized according with their own law, isn't it? And so when you see American, and they strategically placing the data center in certain country, or some nasty guy, or picking data center located in somewhere where there's no law. So equally same thing, isn't it? Yeah, with the with the government, and they will place a data center within their own territory, because well, we mustn't forget about the internet. It's still using using a actual real well. We are not actually in a virtual well, and we are actually in a real well, but we are just using some 0 and 1 to communicate or to do something which is we want it to do. So after all, we haven't left a real well. So we're still in a territorial well. So wherever you accessing internet, you are still strictly speaking adhering to that country's law. So whether your cloud is based in the West or in the East is subject to that country's law. The data center is subject to that country's law. So they're different.
Yeah, and then we have to ask Madame Chusla about the new concept that people are discussing, data transparency. How would it, can we get the answer out of that concept? Or should it be the new idea that we develop for the future? When we engage more and more into the connected things and IoT, is data transparency an answer or not? I don't know.
Well, again, data transparency is a matter of meaning. What do we mean with data transparency? If we mean the right of the data subject to control his or her data, yes, it is an answer. It is a general principle. It is, of course, provided by European legislation. It is the right to control their data. And this right has also been called a positive liberty, in opposite with the negative liberty, which is the right to be let alone. So as a positive liberty, it is recognized by European regulation.
Kun Salini, yes.
Sorry, just to be more precise. So I think that, so echoing again Mr. Frank LaRue, so I think the internet is borderless, but we all come from different countries. What is the one thing that we can say is truly universal? I think the only thing is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? So that should be the minimum standards. That should definitely be the minimum standards for any privacy, any data protection law. And I think maybe it's good for us that we are behind so that we have time to learn from many different countries. So I think that then building on that, then we can then look at which groups, then maybe there are particular groups that we may view as vulnerable, particularly more sensitive, and then we can build more protection for those people. But I think the basic, I would say, should be in compliance without any question with that. And any deviation or any government actions that would violate that would need to be with legal due process, with oversight, and that should be well within this principle of necessary and proportionate. And so I personally agree with this website, Necessary and Proportionate, which is actually, a lot of IT people and civil society putting a lot of effort on articulating what they mean after the mass surveillance scandal. So I think we're learning, right? But I think now it's become more and more clear on what should be the bare minimum that we adhere to. Because, if we talk about this 10 years ago, maybe it's not so clear. So I think that should definitely be the case. But again, my concern is about the risk of extending, this term national security to override the privacy without any due process, and that's the big concern. And not to mention the connection between corporates and government, which we haven't really talked much about. So I think there's now a lot of experts are now using the term corporate surveillance. So they say some of them even say we don't have privacy anymore. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah, I do agree with you that we have to stick to the Human Rights Convention. By the way, if you're interested in Human Rights Convention and all those freedom discussion, tomorrow we have a lot of experts who will be sitting and talking about that. We have one from OSCE who is also the one who just go out and examining everybody on freedom of speech. Now I think it's a good time for us to open the Q&A question. We are talking about among us a lot. I'd like to open for Q&A. Mr. Fox, everybody has referred to the U.S. places all the time.
Mike? Yeah.
So here's Mr. Fox over there, please. He's been in Thailand for a long time, and he knows in and out of Thailand so much. So, please.
Thank you very much. I represent an organization called the Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce. We've been working in the ICT space for about 15 years. We have currently 33 chamber members and about 9,000 businesses as our members here doing business in Thailand. They are local and foreign companies. First of all, before making 4 quick points, if I may, I'd like to recognize the role that ETDA has played in bringing in community views from the industry in Thailand. Over this year, ETDA has conducted a number of open forum sessions which have been invaluable, I think, in terms of industry understanding and exchange of dialogue. So we should recognize ETDA, and today, of course, this is one of a similar kind of event where particularly the legal perspective can come to play. First of all, I'd like to say that in terms of security issues, we have formulated the view that privacy and freedom on the one hand and security on the other are not extreme opposites. If we look at the governance issues and we look at the multi-stakeholder model, for example, of internet governance, which has been adopted by many countries in the world, including some in Southeast Asia, we find that if security is recognized as everybody's job, for example, the CIO in a large company, the internet officer and an SME, if you like, and everybody else should be observing voluntary codes of conduct in addition to the law of the land in connection with internet security. And to do that, they have to believe in the system and they have to trust it. The second point I'd like to make is about the concept of trust in the internet. So we have developed this concept of trusted internet. If you're a business, would you put your confidential business communications in an environment where choice A, the only model of governance and security, is a top-down model with very draconian laws which are almost impossible to comply with and which are selectively enforced, versus another model where there's a multi-stakeholder model of governance, and the whole industry is pretty well bought into the idea of making sure that the internet is a safe and secure environment. So what that comes to is the idea that we should recognize that in the digital economy, everything we do is ultimately empowered by telecoms networks. And there's a question of network and operational security, which should be the starting point for everybody in terms of making sure security works. And as I say, that should be everybody's job. The next point I'd like to make is about IoT. If we examine the three dimensions of permission in the draft personal data protection law, which is not very different to laws in certain other countries, we have permission at collection stage, at use stage, and at disclosure stage. It may not be precisely called like that in every personal data protection law, but that's pretty well the three stages where permission is expected. When we come to the IoT world, it's almost impossible to get permission to collect on every stage unless you do it on an on-globo basis or a contract of adhesion, take it or leave it, for example. But if you're trying to collect data based on the VIN number of your car, and the government wants to manage the roadways better, so they're going to collect data about who's using the roadways, etc., upfront consent to collection at every time might be difficult. So what that means is that the consent to use and disclosure becomes much more important. And that comes back to the question of trust. If you allow people to collect, how are they going to store it, manage it, and use it? What's the system for doing that? So that comes back to that question of trust. The next point I'd like to make a little bit is that I think we should be a little cautious about generalizing in East-West differences. If we take two organizations that I'm familiar with, for example, both based in Hong Kong, the Asia Internet Coalition and the Asia Cloud Computing Association, the members are typically large global names in the IT world, as well as a number of regional companies. And the recommendations they make to regional governments are pretty well in line with what you might find almost anywhere in the world. So it might be interesting to say that East Germany was part of the West and North Korea is part of the East. So it's a silly illustration, but it might illustrate that point. In terms of cross-border use, we should really look at a rule of law-based approach. If we look at the development of the Personal Data Protection Act in Thailand here, this is a difficult question, and there's no right answer. But it's gone from you can send the data somewhere else as long as that other country has a sufficient standard of protection, a little bit like the European model in principle that was explained earlier. And then there was a draft that said it's up to a committee of the Digital Economy and Society Committee to decide. And one might say, well, let us not have a flag of convenience approach and a Liberian registered vessel being, the laws of Liberia being the proper law of what governs our cross-border use. So one way of doing it would be to say, for example, you can send your data anywhere, but you're always going to be subject to Thai law if you're the data custodian, as an example. So some kind of, rule of law-based approach to that would be useful. I've probably taken up more than my fair share of time, and so those are some points. But I think it is very important to have privacy. The Paris situation should not torpedo our efforts to make sure that we have a proper regime of privacy. It may come down to structure in the industry. So we have networks that should be operated on professional bases, and then we have a government-led national security set of rules that should be run based on a rule of law approach that people trust and can have confidence in. So Those are the kinds of approaches that we feel are important. In terms of Thailand being a data hub and digital economy hub in all sorts of ways, we must always remember the concept of trust. If the data is not trustworthy because people don't use it properly, then this is not going to be a place where people want to do data analytics and all those other things. And privacy is a very, very important aspect of good quality data, because if you have privacy concerns, then you will not want to disclose data that can be very useful. So apologies for going a bit over, but thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. I give you 30 seconds to explain a little bit more about your work as a business council under the APEC on trust.
Okay. Well, we're not really
Only
under
30 seconds. Yeah. Okay.
We're not really under APEC, but we take the APEC model law on this is something that we've studied at some length. We've also looked at European examples and other things, but I think the APEC model law on cross-border use is something that definitely is a good starting point for cross-border use, at least anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Any? Please. Oh, you can keep it tomorrow, but we can talk about today. That's fine too, because he will be on our speaker tomorrow.
Well, I don't have a comment. I have honest questions. My name is Kwek, and thank you for sharing the examples in Europe. I think, we have a lot of precedents set by the two decisions that you talked about against Google and Facebook in Europe. And I'd like to open this question up to all the panelists. The first one, and just for the benefit of my education, is a question about enforcement. How does a local court enforce any decision on companies that might be based in the US or in Hong Kong or in London that use local terms of service? And if we're talking about a big company like Google and Facebook, then, maybe there's a sales office on the ground and you can take action against that office. But if we're talking about startups that are starting in Bangkok or, or even more mature companies that don't have a local footprint, how do you follow up on enforcement? That's the first question. The second question is, what kind of implications are there with such a precedent when you have court thinking that domestic law can go across borders in what we have known over the past 15 to 20 years as a borderless technology? That's the second thing. The third thing, in terms of the Facebook case, what kind of implications are there for cross-border data flows if a particular country, and it's Europe in this instance, but maybe Thailand or maybe Singapore or maybe some other country decides that to invalidate a safe harbor or to say that this is not good enough, and what kind of implications are as we think about cloud technologies and Internet of Things and all these grand things that we have thought about as the future of the Internet? So these are three questions I'd like to open up to the panelists.
That's fine, but you can answer yourself tomorrow as well. But today we will leave this question to some of our experts. Maybe the direct answer will be tomorrow because he will be addressing that one and Internet jurisdiction. But then again, this is a real question that we lawyers face, right? How can we enforce? By the way, Google sits on the other side of your table. Doctor, is there any, how to go about the extraterritoriality of the Internet things? Just in legal principle, what are the conflict of law rules that we can apply? Can we apply, or can we apply the competition law across border? Just general.
So this is the question on Internet law. It's not a question. It's the main question. There is not one answer, because it's not only a legal problem, it's a political problem, as you, of course, can imagine, because there is not one legislator on the Internet. There are many national legislators. So the problem is to find a way to solve the problem by now, and today it would, general rules on choices of law would apply, general rules on international convention would apply, but the real problem remains not solved because, as I said, it is a political problem. Having said that, we can go further into technical legal details, but I don't know if we have time. Maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow.
Maybe, yeah,
Or you
after
can
the
take a
break.
course in Bologna. She is a professor at Internet Law. And there are a lot of things to be answered following that question. I mean, on the public side, on the private side, commercial or competition. Do you have any reflection on that? They are basically legal questions, but if you want to have reflection, it'll be fine too.
From my research experience, policing, if you policing over the border, is problematic because your jurisdiction is already within your border. So when you think about that and answering your question, no, the king's rule do not go over the border. If anybody who is based over your border, your reign do not. Your king's rule do not reign over the border. Simple answer.
But Dr. Lau, to make the matter worse, there is a kind of practice called network management practice, right? In which firms from somewhere else can manage the access and limit the access to data from the other side. You mean that one, right? How can we deal with that? The traffic management or network management technology?
Very difficult. Why do I have to answer these all difficult questions? Well, very difficult. If you have reverse, it's the same. I mean, if someone attack you from overseas, and say someone based somewhere in Russia, taking Bank of Thailand, $1 billion USA, and how likely you can go over to Russia and prosecute this guy if this guy never come out of Russia. Difficult, right? So same thing is apply. Someone attack from over the border. Your king's rule do not go over the border and fetch him, unless you are United States of America sending fleet number 7 to patrolling on your sea. So that is unlikely to be happening. So same thing apply. Someone coming over the border attacking you, very hard to secure your internet.
Yeah. Kun Salini, any reflection on that? No. Any other question? Fine. If not, I think just stay here, time out. And I think we have come to the conclusion. And I think you have seen this is the new area in which things is changing and developing all the time. There are a lot of questions and more questions than answer. But then again, we know what should we be asking. And I think this is one of the work that ETDA is doing. ETDA is one of the organizations that's trying to fight very hard to make sure that the use of internet is free and safe, and then it is the future platform for Thai economy and the future for our younger generation. I think we come to the end and ready to thank ETDA and thank the chairperson who stay with us all the time. Thank Kun Sulankana who also listening and writing what is going on. And thank you audience, and most of all I'd like to thank our panelists to spend their time flying here and share with us the knowledge. I hope you enjoy the session and have some kind of food for thought back home. And please give a big hand to our speakers.
And please give a big round of applause to the moderator, to Associate Professor Sutham Yunaitam. Please, four of you stay on stage. And as we can see the changing of the internet and technology these days, both on Western and Eastern, so it's come very fast. And we can see the difference in many countries that the people can be reached and be prohibited on the internet or technology too. So may I invite Mrs. Jirawan Bunperm, Chairman of the Executive Board of Directors of ETDA, to present souvenirs to the distinguished moderator and panelists. Associate Professor สุธรรมอยู่ในธรรม Dean of the Faculty of Law, Professor Gisela Finocchiaro, Professor Department of Legal Studies, University of Bologna, and Chairperson of AsianSIL Working Group 4. Dr. Laurie Love, Chair of Asia Pacific Association of Technology and Society. And Ms. Sarini Achawat-Nantakul, Adjunct Professor, Thammasat University, Member Thai Netizen Network. And it's time for a photo group. And may I invite Mrs. Surangkhana Wayupa, the Executive Director and CEO of ETDA as well. Very productive discussion this afternoon. We have now reached at the end of today's agenda. So tomorrow we will meet again at 10:30 a.m. in this room, Grand Hall 1, to discuss the topic entitled Internet Governance. So please everyone come and join us. And also if you guys want a summary of the conference today, so please download, go to www.eda.or.th. Thank you everyone for joining us once again, and I wish you have a safe trip back home. See you again. Thank you and goodbye. ขอบพระคุณและสวัสดีทุกท่านนะคะ พรุ่งนี้พบกัน 10:30 นาทีที่ห้องเดิมแห่งนี้ค่ะ